Preface. I published a book entitled The Swofford-Tollett Feud in 2003. Although the research for that book focused primarily on a particular family feud, it became evident as the research progressed that Bledsoe County had the dubious distinction of a unique and extremely violent past. Following the Civil War, the term Bloody Bledsoe was applied to Bledsoe County in newspaper and magazine articles in its violent era from 1861 to 1950. After completing the feud book, I began researching to determine why Bledsoe County became known as Bloody Bledsoe. Over several years, I talked to more than 300 people. I viewed and copied countless court documents and published materials from newspapers and crime periodicals. In the process, I accumulated files on over 300 separate incidences of homicides and deadly assaults occurring in Bledsoe County from 1861 to 1950. Initially, my intent was to encompass the results of my research into one book entitled Bloody Bledsoe. However, it became apparent that to tell the entire story of each of these killings and the background of the people involved was too much material for one book. Therefore, I've decided to publish a series of 3 or 4 books with a Bloody Bledsoe theme. In retrospect, I'm calling the Swofford-Tollett Feud book, published in 2003, the first in this series. The Church Lester book is the second. A book about Jim Hamilton, third in this Bloody Bledsoe series, should be published very soon. I was born, raised, and spent most of my entire life in the beautiful Sequatchie Valley in Bledsoe County, and I'm very mindful that some accounts of my ancestors are disturbing. I've documented several hundred of my ancestors and relatives who are associated with this lovely valley. We should remember that they lived in a time and circumstance foreign to our modern world. All the principles in this book are long departed. It's not my purpose to judge. My goal is to preserve as much local history as possible, especially the oral history, for the everlasting benefit of current and future generations. The oral recollections that are as integral part of this material came primarily from elderly friends and relatives of those involved. A few of the accounts came from eyewitnesses. However, most of the oral information came from what the person had been told. Accounts derived from eyewitnesses are credible. Accounts not supported by court-generated evidence are suspect. Also, rumors can be fabricated depending on the motives of those who originate the rumor. When possible, I have attempted to collaborate second-hand accounts and be as accurate as possible. However, it's impossible to guarantee total accuracy. As the masthead of the old Pikeville Flashlight newspaper published in the early 1900s stated, I know not what the truth may be. I tell the tale as 'twas told to me. But before I tell you some of these tales that I've researched, I'd like to describe their location and their background. The setting for these historical stories is the eastern part of the state of Tennessee. East Tennessee is a thickly wooded land of rugged mountains, valleys, and streams. It's composed mainly of the fabled Appalachian Mountain Range and the Cumberland Plateau. These mountains are ancient. They once rivaled the height and beauty of the Rocky Mountains of the western United States. Although they still have a grandeur that is reminiscent of their past, they have slowly evolved into gentle tree-covered giants, which, seen from a distance, they recede into the rank upon rank of lovely blue and greens. Their present-day image is captured by millions of photographers and painters, and it's engraved in the memories of their many admirers. This specific location of the people and events in this book is the lovely and unique Sequatchie Valley. It's considered to be a part of the Cumberland Plateau of the Appalachian Mountains. The slow-moving Sequatchie River drains the valley as it gently flows southward from the southern part of the Cumberland County to the Tennessee River near the Alabama border. The valley's principal town is Pikeville, and it's in Bledsoe County. A distinctive feature of the Sequatchie Valley is its straightness. From the north end to the south end, it's almost perfectly straight. It's over 150 miles long and only 3 to 5 miles wide. It's one of the Earth's few unique geological features that can be seen from outer space. The Sequatchie Valley is bounded on either side by rugged mountain ranges, 1,500 feet above the valley floor. On the east is Walden's Ridge. On the west is the escarpment of the Cumberland Plateau. The valley provides an open, sunny valley floor in its combination with dark, mysterious hollows and hills to serve as the home of these special people and the events that swirled around them. A glimpse of terrible times in the 1860s that occurred in this mountain and valley paradise will give you a bit of a background into the lives of the mountain people who lived here. I won't go into all the history of the Civil War, since it has been covered thoroughly in many forms and in many ways. Instead, I'd like to focus on the effects of this horrible war and what they had on the people living in the Sequatchie Valley and the surrounding area. The Civil War was a terrible war, with catastrophic losses on both sides. Between 600,000 and 700,000 soldiers died while in the regular armies. Many soldiers died of disease, starvation, hypothermia, or other deadly causes. Thousands more were injured mentally and physically for the rest of their lives. More soldiers died in this horrible conflict than in all the other wars of our nation combined. However, there was very little military action between the two regular armies in the Sequatchie Valley in Cumberland and Bledsoe counties. It was the civilian population of these two rural counties that suffered the most. Civilians in the northern state didn't fear their neighbors. 90% or more of their neighbors were Union supporters. The other 10% kept a low profile. They lived in peace with their neighbors, and they were not afraid someone would kill them, burn their houses or their barns, or commit other atrocities. Civilians in the deep southern states, for the most part, were not worried about their neighbors either. Those few who did support the Union kept a very low profile, or traveled north and joined the Union Army. There was a very big difference in Tennessee, depending on the area in which you lived. The state is divided into 3 distinctly different areas, each with its own unique geography, crops, floral and fauna, history, and heritage. Hence the 3 stars of the Tennessee state flag. Rich, fertile flatlands make up the western third of the state. Its early white settlers had their roots in the French area surrounding New Orleans. Their architecture, food, crop production, language, and customs reflect that area. The main crop was cotton, and it was produced on large plantations using slave labor. It followed that 70% or more of the population favored the Southern cause. The middle third of the state had much of its history connected with the Spanish from the Florida area. Here, 2/3 of the population favored the South also. The eastern third of Tennessee is rocky, hilly, and mountainous. In early populations, they flowed into the area from the northeast and was made up of a good many people of Scot-Irish descent. The terrain didn't lend itself to any farming that required slaves. It is estimated that about 2/3 of that citizenry in East Tennessee supported the northern cause. The 2 counties focused on in this book are Bledsoe and Cumberland. They're both located on the fault line between Middle and East Tennessee. On the western side of these 2 counties, 2/3 supported the South. On the eastern side, 2/3 supported the North. The residents of these 2 dividing line counties were adamant, passionate, and very worked up about slavery, states' rights, saving the Union, and other issues that divided citizens all across the nation. My research of records indicates that the citizens of these 2 remotely mountain valley counties were evenly split in their loyalties. Records reveal that in Cumberland County, 116 residents joined the Union Army, while 117 joined the Confederate Army. In Bledsoe County, 208 citizens joined the Union Army, while 232 joined the Confederate Army. Not only were communities and counties split, but many entire families were split over the war. Going to war on opposite sides of the conflict divided many brothers and cousins. On a personal basis, my great-great-great-grandfather, Thomas Swafford Sr., had 16 grandsons who joined and fought in the Civil War. 8 of them joined the Union Army, and 8 joined the Confederate Army. Within a year after the war started, intense Confederate and Union guerrilla activity plagued Bledsoe, Cumberland, and the surrounding counties. As the war progressed, law and order broke down. Schools were closed. Churches were split or closed. Almost all community activities were disrupted because of the bitter division caused by the war. The courts closed, and county sheriffs could not or would not enforce the law and keep the peace. All of this set the stage for the very serious troubles ahead. In both the North and the South, many men did not answer the call to serve in the military. The breakdown of law and order in Bledsoe and Cumberland counties provided these men a safe haven. Draft dodgers, deserters, thieves, bushwhackers, and other misfits from several states flocked to the rugged vastness of this area to hide. Many of these men joined guerrilla bands. Bledsoe, Cumberland, and some of the bordering counties became a no-man's land, with neither side having much of a stronghold. Area residents had to contend with these ruthless villains. The guerrilla war on the home front was savage. Homes, barns, and outbuildings were looted and burned. Civilians were robbed and terrorized, and many were killed. Cordell Hull, a famous Tennessee statesman who was Secretary of State during the Roosevelt administration, described the guerrilla warfare in this area as a perfect hell. To give you an idea of the horrors of this guerrilla war, following is an account of only one raid in this area. On January 20th, 1865, John Bradley and his guerrilla gang from Yankeetown, just north of Sparta, entered the head of the Squatchy Valley in broad daylight and seized John Parham and a black man working for him in the field. Parham was not in the army, but he had assisted the Unions by purchasing horses for the Union Army. The gang took John back to his home and hollered to his family to come out on the porch. Parham's wife Betty came out holding her baby, with other children close by her side. With them looking on, Bradley shot and killed John. The gang then proceeded to search the house, the smokehouse, the outbuildings, and took all of the valuables they could find. John Parham is only one of the many civilians murdered in this area during this terrible war. Parham happened to be a Union supporter, but an equal number of civilians who supported the Confederacy were also killed. The most famous leaders of the guerrilla gang who terrorized this area were Champ Ferguson, John Bradley, and George Carter, who supported the Confederacy, and Tinker Dave Beatty, Harv Schilling, who supported the Union. The motivation for these killings, lootings, and other crimes was a strange combination of war, politics, retribution, survival, greed, and corruption. The atrocities and guerrilla activity didn't stop when the war ended in April of 1865. Those discharged from both sides returned to the valley to become neighbors once again. Tensions increased. Veterans came home to avenge the wrongs that they and their families had suffered at the hands of the other side. For 2 years after the war, Union partisans, with government approval, continued to discriminate against and cause numerous problems for families who had supported the South. This description of the lovely valley of the Squatchy and their brief history of the atrocities of the Civil War on the people of this valley will provide the reader with a better understanding of the stories that follow in this book.